Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Wells Ellenberg. I work with Southern Company here in Washington, D.C., and also have the privilege of serving as chair of the UGA SPIA Alumni Board of Directors. So on behalf of the board, we got an incredible group. We're really grateful to have all of you here today. We're especially grateful to Congresswoman Williams' office for all of their work in making this happen. Mel, we're really glad that you're here today, filling in for the boss, and look forward to all of your comments, especially interviewed by probably my favorite professor at the University of Georgia, who happens to be a fraternity brother of mine, Dr. Charles Bullock. So really glad to have you here today as well. We got a lot of UGA students in the audience. They're interning in DC this summer. And one of the things that we as a SPIA alumni board and the faculty and staff at SPIA are so focused on is making sure that students at Georgia have the opportunity to work and live and experience being here in our nation's capital. So thank you all for being here. And of course, we're at McGuire Woods Consulting today. We could not have had this event without them. So we're grateful to have Ann Thomas and also our SPIA Alumni Board fellow member, Clayton Cox, another fraternity brother from Georgia, here as well. Thank you for lending your beautiful space for our event. Finally, I want to thank our sponsors, without whom we could not have made today's event possible. Our diamond sponsor, UPS, platinum sponsors, the Home Depot, Randstad, Coca-Cola, and Southern Company. Our gold sponsors, Aflac and McGuire Woods Consulting. Silver sponsors, PepsiCo, Energy Marketers of America, and Majority Strategies. Bronze sponsor, Troutman Pepper. And our patron sponsors, Kevin Abernathy, Jordan Layson, Virginia McNally, and UCB. Your sponsorships, your support today go to support the vital, really remarkable work that SPIA does and the priorities of our SPIA Alumni Board, which are need-based undergraduate study abroad scholarships and internship stipends for students in our MPA program. It also helps SPIA serve its students and carry out its mission. But I'm not the best person to speak to all the great work that SPIA is doing, so we're grateful today to have the Dean of the School of Public and International Affairs, Dr. Dean Auer. Dean Auer, come on up.
Well, hi, everybody. And I must say, Wells, as our distinguished chair of our alumni board, thank you so much for your leadership over the years. And to all of our board members who make the Federal Policy Outlook possible and many other events that we have, including they have a hand in an event that we will have in October back here in DC, which is our Alumni and Friends reception. So please be on the lookout for the date for that, but that'll be in October. I wanted to also again, a special thanks to our sponsors that Wells mentioned and to McGuire Woods for this fantastic space. And in addition, Jordan Layson, who worked so hard to engage our sponsors and bring together support for this series. Much appreciated. Well, it's my pleasure actually to introduce our speakers. And Melanie Farah, who is joining us, probably found out that she was joining us just a few hours ago, so we're particularly grateful to her. She is a University of Maryland Bachelor of Science grad, or maybe Bachelor of Arts.
So yes, University of Maryland has their government politics program is Bachelor of Arts.
Bachelor of Arts, okay. We're one of the few actually in political science that has Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Science, but we can talk about that later. But your bachelor's is in government politics and leadership. And then you have a master's degree in public policy from GW here locally, and then a master's in education from the University of California, San Francisco. Today she serves as Chief of Staff for Congresswoman Nikema Williams of the 5th District in Georgia. That's about roughly 3/4 of Atlanta, I think. So it's
it now is all of Atlanta.
It's all of Atlanta now. Oh, this is indeed right. I need to go back and look at the redistricting. And you serve as the majority freshman representative for the House Chief of Staff Association.
Yes.
Right out of graduate school, you served as Chief of Staff for Atlanta City Councilman H. Lamar Willis. And you've worked for Head Start and the USD Agricultural Market Service. And most recently, you were a member of the Board of Directors for the Diaspora African Women's Network and chair of the Economic Development and Culture Committee on the Community Board 11M in New York City. Well, it's a pleasure to welcome you, Ms. Farah. So,
Thank you.
Dr. Bullock will be familiar to many of you. I cannot help myself how many people have not had a class with Dr. Bullock in this audience. Okay, that's kind of what I expect, just a handful. So Dr. Charles Bullock holds the Richard B. Russell Chair in Political Science and is the Josiah Meigs Distinguished Teaching Professor and University Professor of Public and International Affairs at the University of Georgia. He's been at the University of Georgia since 1968, with the exception of 2 years out in the wilderness, but he came back. Dr. Bullock is author, co-author, and editor or co-editor of more than 30 books and more than 250 articles and chapters. He just sent a book to Oxford University Press last week, so he sort of does one every a couple a year. So he's published in major political science, public administration, and education journals. His teaching and research specialties are legislative politics and Southern politics. And with that, thank you for being here, Dr. Bullock.
My pleasure, yeah.
So we are going to move forward, and please take it away, Dr. Bullock.
All right, thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Glad you're here. One of the books I did, published last year, dealt with special elections. And of course, that's how your boss got to Congress. And the way she got there is a bit different than typically happens when there is a death to replace, and that is usually that new member will run both for the remainder of the term of the deceased member and then for the entirety of the coming term. Your boss didn't do that. Why not? Why did she break with that general pattern?
I mean, so it was a very thoughtful decision, and she said this quite frankly, that in that instance, she was also the chair and still is the chair of the Democratic Party of Georgia. And she had made a stated commitment to working and doing whatever she could to make sure that she turned Georgia blue. And with that in mind, it was making sure that we honor that commitment and thinking through the bandwidth it took to not just honor that commitment, but to make sure that turning Georgia blue came true and an additional 33 days. And to be quite frank, I think she made the most excellent decision because we now have a periwinkle state and 2 Democratic senators sitting in that seat. And she was able to honor that commitment and then still serve in the seat.
That makes sense, right, because typically a person wouldn't be wearing that second hat. So, okay, well, thank you for, nobody else was ever interested, but I was. So I thank you for that one. As a freshman, freshmen put in their committee requests. Usually, I guess probably 3 would be about the norm. Some do more, some do less. Which committee assignments did Congresswoman Williams ask for, and the 2 she got, were these on her list?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
So I'm not sure how familiar with everyone is with the process, but in order to request a committee, you have to have a formal letter. You have to submit a formal letter requesting to be placed on the committee. And you do your best to aim high and make sure that you are reaching for a select committee. What we did in this instance was recognize that both Georgia and Atlanta have become the center of the political universe and asked for everything that we wanted. And so she made the ask for the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and for the Financial Services Committee. And it has been an honor to watch her not just serve on both committees, but learn from the really well-established leadership that we have on both committees and do the work to bring home as much as we can for the district. And what happened was, in addition to being able to get the 2 committees that she asked for, she was reached out to by Speaker Pelosi and asked to serve on a 3rd committee, which is the Select Committee on the Modernization of Congress. So she has a little bit more on her plate than the average freshman.
Okay, so she had reasons for her ask. There were things she wanted to do, get from those committees. How has that been working out? I know she's only been there for 18 months, but and Congress moves slowly. I guess maybe that's part of the modernization maybe to address. But so what is she? What can she point to and say? Well, I was able to do this, or I'm have this in the works if it's not already to be delivered.
I agree that generally speaking, Congress moves slowly, but I have found that we've been able to get a lot done within the 18 months that we've had. So with the infrastructure bill passing and being able to not just say that we are committed to bringing home the dollars, but to actually bring them home to revitalize this country's infrastructure, not just in Georgia, but across the country. That has been something that we can actively and avidly point to. And as much as I can as the chief of staff, make sure that people in the district know that we've brought these things home. So for example, recently you may have seen on the news about an additional $40 million going to Atlanta Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. That is part of that. This isn't just something that we did in Congress. We need to show you what it is going to do, what we've brought home, and how it's going to make your lives better as a person who lives in the district and is traveling through the world's busiest and most efficient airport in.
Okay, now that has gotten a lot of play in the Atlanta media. Are there other things which either the 5th District or Georgia more generally is getting out of this piece of legislation?
Absolutely. So in addition to what we've seen transportation-wise, we've actually been able to establish really strong relationships with what I like to call Transaction Alley. So what a lot of people don't know about Georgia and specifically in Atlanta is the growing financial services sector that we have in our district. And one of the Congresswoman's stated goals is to do the work to close the racial wealth gap in Atlanta. That doesn't just mean pointing to this is the problem, but it also means establishing the relationships with the companies who work in our sector so that people understand and know what the problem is, and we are collectively addressing some of the things that cause those problems. So for example, on the Financial Services Committee, there have been a few things that we've done. Working on the Financial Services Committee, we have worked to move forward from committee. The best way to explain it, it has to do with not just your student loans, but how you're able to pay down your student loans. So right now, if you have a student loan and you've defaulted, and let's say you've then corrected your default, that default stays on your credit. So we worked with the Financial Services Committee to say, okay, you've defaulted, you've course corrected, and because it is specifically student loan debt, and we know that the distinct and entrenched troubles that students have had paying that student loan debt, we're going to say, now that you have corrected that, that is actually something that can now be pulled from your credit report. Because we want you to, as a student who maybe when you first got out of school wasn't able to fiscally sustain that initial commitment, but you've, as an adult, made that correction. We don't want it to inhibit you from being a homeowner. We don't want it to inhibit you from the other things that you need to do to grow and create personal wealth and to uplift your community as a person bringing wealth to your community. So we're looking at solving those problems in ways that are thoughtful and that work for both the individual but don't necessarily interfere with the capitalistic system that we have.
Oh, okay, all right. Something else that has changed. Earmarks have been brought back. How has the Congresswoman worked on that? Are there things that she has been able to put the mark on so that it goes directly to the district or to Georgia?
Yes. So, and we've also done that in what I feel is a very thoughtful way. So, for example, this time around, I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with Hosea Feeds the Hungry or Hosea Helps. So Hosea Helps has been around for quite some time, and they've done a lot of the good work that other food banks do, plus some. So they make sure that people have access to foods when they lose jobs, when they're students in schools. What a lot of people don't talk about is that you go away to school, and if you don't have the time to have a full-time job, it can become difficult to feed yourself. So Hosea Helps has actually been one of our distinct beneficiaries, and so they'll be taking dollars to build out their warehouse even further so that they can hold and store more food because the need has become greater, especially since the pandemic, the need has become greater. We've worked with the city of East Point to work on some of their sewage issues. We've worked with the city of Atlanta to improve the infrastructure on the Campbellton Road corridor for cars and for people so that it is safer to walk and establish more sidewalks in that area. The list is long, but I want everyone to know that it wasn't just let's bring home the bacon. It was also let's make sure that it touches people directly. Who are we helping? one of the things a Congresswoman always does is make sure that we're centering the most marginalized. So we're not just helping everyone, but we're also making sure that we're helping those who most need to be helped, because that in and of itself helps us as a collective and a community.
Yeah, Hosea feeds the hungry. I guess that started, I think, as I recall, just with Thanksgiving, and then it's kind of grown and grown and grown, and so that's a very worthy cause to be involved with. Congresswoman is the president of the Democratic freshman class. Now, what does that involve?
Some good and some extra work, as I can
see what you can say, right?
Yes.
Okay, right.
So the president of the freshman class, and she was elected unanimously, y'all. So she doesn't not like to lose; she just doesn't lose. So, but she is the president of the freshman class, and she was unanimously elected to represent the collective group's needs to leadership. So one of the reasons why she was chosen is not just because, they love her just as I do, but it's also because she has relationships across a spectrum of Democrats. We are not, as a party or as a people, a monolith. So she has been able to establish relationships with everyone from the more liberal end to the more conservative end of the party, and everyone knows that she is going to adequately and honestly represent their voice as a collective in a way that is not biased to one particular group or another. She understands that each voice is different, each state's needs are different, and each member of that congressional class needs is different. So that was not just why that she was selected, but it also is great to like the person whose office is going to be calling you to do special order hours, because that is also the responsibility of the freshman class. So at the end of a congressional day, special order hours are presided over by a member of the freshman class. So what made that a little bit tricky this year was we had, quite frankly, a little bit of a smaller freshman class this Congress. And so it is the responsibility of each member to preside over special order hours for a certain number of times per year throughout the term. And it is our responsibility as an office to make sure that each office honors that commitment, and that if someone is sick or unavailable, that either we find another member of Congress to cover that space, or we take on the responsibility and the Congresswoman will cover for that person. So she not only has her commitment of special order hours, but if we are unable to find coverage, she also takes on the responsibility of presiding on behalf of that other member of the class.
Wow. Sounds like then that you talk about her being well-known and appreciated across the whole range of the Democratic Party. Again, as a new member, how did she get so well-known?
She's friendly.
Indication is the rest of them aren't.
No. That's not a knock on how anyone is, but she leads with an authenticity that I think makes others more comfortable. She is going to make sure that she connects with every single member of her class and gets to know not just who they are, but who they represent through conversation. Because that's what matters to each member the most. Am I fulfilling and serving the needs of my constituency? And so a lot of what I see in terms of her connectivity with the other members is just taking the time to listen and learn from them. And that may not be unique to her, but it's something that she made sure that when we first got there, we took the time to do. Like, we came in not looking to run for freshman class president, but the first thing we did was let's make sure everybody has a little bit of Georgia hospitality. So each freshman member got their own Coke bottle with their name on it, saying, "Welcome, Representative so-and-so to Congress. We look forward to connecting with you." We made sure we do that with everybody as they come on board.
When I worked on Capitol Hill, we always had a lot of people dropping in because we had the free Cokes and peanuts. Is that?
That is still the case. And I think it's a boon for not just us, but it really represents who and what Georgia is. And I love having that open door policy, so that if y'all are looking to come to visit the Hill, 1406 is open to visitors, period. Don't care what party you are. We are open to Georgians. So.
Yeah, okay. Relationships with the leadership. Some Georgia Democrats I've talked in the past have said, well, it was a bit harder perhaps for them with Nancy Pelosi. So I was wondering with regard to Congresswoman We have Nancy Pelosi, James Clyburn, Steny Hoyer. Is she kind of more attracted to one of those other, or do you maybe you work with the staff more in one of those offices than the other?
I don't want to. I feel like I don't want to say lucky because it was very much earned. But the Congresswoman came to Congress very well received by Speaker Pelosi and Leader Hoyer and Whip Clyburn. Not just because she was a freshman coming in, but she had a pre-existing relationship with Representative Lewis. So Congressman Lewis was not just a mentor of hers, but it was also a family friend. Her husband worked for Congressman Lewis for 8 years. And so they had built a relationship. I remember seeing him at the wedding. So there was a standing relationship. So when she came to Congress, that relationship also paved the way for her to have open door policy and easy conversations with members of leadership. And they did reach out when the Congresswoman came to Congress to make sure that she was not just well received, but it's a lot to be in a legacy seat. It is not a small task. So they understand that we are always going to bend over backwards to do what we can to serve the 5th Congressional District and to live up to, if not, and hopefully move forward with the things that were set out by Congressman Lewis. And that's not something that you can do by yourself. So it was wonderful that as Congresswoman-elect Speaker Pelosi reached out to Congresswoman Williams before she was formally inaugurated to give one of the last Democratic addresses before the House turned over to the Democrats, just to show that, you know, we are honoring the new freshmen who are coming in, who are there to respect the past and bring us into the future.
Okay, that's very interesting. Yeah, I think that. Everything we hear is that the lines dividing Democrats and Republicans are very rigid. Does the Congresswoman ever work across those party lines, or is everybody just kind of you're in your camp and they're in their camp, and there's not much?
There's not much.
Okay, so they're not things which even like the Georgia delegation gets together across party lines as they
Oh, of course.
I mean, are there? Aren't there? I mean,
there are.
Okay. All right.
There are. So, I mean, please know that we are in support of bipartisanship, but not bipartisanship just for bipartisanship's sake. We are working to make sure that when there are things that we are moving forward in a bipartisan fashion, that people are centering Georgians. People are centering what's best for the people. In every instance, we would love to work with everyone, but I'm also going to be frank that it can be difficult to work with someone who doesn't respect who you are as a human, as a black person, as a woman. With that said, that's not everybody. I'm very clear about that. And it has been very nice, if not open in the public, but behind closed doors, to have some outreach across the aisle from those who have been supportive. And we have definitely leaned into those relationships, the ones that are working. And if we didn't have those relationships, we would not now forthcoming be having a John R. Lewis Memorial Post Office. You cannot, in any state, get a post office renamed after anyone without the entire delegation signing on. And that means every single member of the delegation, whether you like them or not, whether they're Democrat or Republican, you cannot move that post office forward. And we were able to successfully get every single member of the Georgia delegation onto that bill to make sure that we're appropriately honoring Congressman Lewis. So yes, she has done that work. We have the relationships that we need to have to carry those things forward. And I'm very proud of the work that I'm doing on the House Chief of Staff Association to make sure that I have those connections with the chiefs who are also in line with doing that work. And I will say there are 1 or 2 offices that specifically make sure that we are having those conversations. So it's been great.
Okay, well, that's encouraging. Probably better if there were more, but at least it's encouraging. There is some conversation across party lines.
I do wish there were more, but I am very proud of the 2 or 3 that we have.
Okay. Now, it used to be, again, this may be ancient history, but at some points in the past, where kind of a women's caucus could bridge partisanship. What is the state? I mean, is there anything approaching a women's caucus now?
So the Congresswoman is the whip for the Democratic Women's Caucus. I am not going to say there is something approaching a women's caucus, but we have worked with women who have been open to getting that work done. So we've moved forward legislation with Congresswoman Letlow from Louisiana to make sure that we were appropriately funding pandemic-related issues to prevent illness and sickness. As you know, she came in after her husband passed. There is legislation we've also worked on with Rep. Tinney, I'm going to say her name correctly, Rep. Tinney from New York. And there have been instances, again, that it is about us centering people, their safety and their health, that have allowed us to work with these offices. But I couldn't speak to the revival as of yet of a women's caucus.
Okay. Now you mentioned that the Congresswoman is what you said, the whip for the
Democratic Women's
Caucus. Okay.
DWC.
All right. So is that part of the overall whip organization or something different?
So it is not part of the overall whip organization, but it is specifically centered around whipping women's issues.
Okay.
So making sure that we're having conversations about reproductive health, making sure that we're having conversations about equal pay. Those initiatives that bring to the fore what are the dire needs of women.
Well, now what again?
And I said dire, yes.
All right. I was trying to think of the exact number of Democratic women, which is, of course, a record number right now.
Correct.
So this must be a kind of extensive whip organization, isn't it?
It's a pretty hefty job.
Yeah.
And it is a new role because of the size of the Democratic Women's Caucus. The role was created for the Congresswoman to be able to work to meet and know all of the women in the Dem Caucus and to create a more united front on women's issues.
Yeah. I was unaware of that. I'm glad to be learning something. What relationship does the office have with the two Democratic senators from Georgia?
Oh, she has a great relationship with them individually and with the offices. So we are proud to say that both Senator Reverend Warnock and Senator Ossoff are the Congresswoman's constituents. And she will tell you whatever chance she can that they're her constituents and she represents them. And it's been great to have a great staff-to-staff relationship and to see them have just a great peer-to-peer relationship. We came in knowing that there was a lot of work to be done and that you needed to be able to work together as a cohort to get that work done, and we've seen that happen. And I just definitely love their staff. So I'm familiar with everybody's chief, and their state directors are amazing people. Can't say enough about how awesome their state directors have been in terms of working with our district director and making sure that if there is an event that we can collaborate on, we do. And we continue to work to show everyone that we can do more together.
Okay, all right, good. You mentioned Congresswoman being on this select committee for modernization of the House. What does it do? What possible challenge could it confront?
So it is intended to work to make Congress not just more effective, but more efficient. Once we got to Congress, we learned very quickly that Congress needs its own scheduler. And I don't say that lightly because there are so many things and missed opportunities that happen because of conflicting committee meetings, hearings. You'll notice often when you watch C-SPAN and you see people voting on the House floor and a vote is supposed to be 10 minutes and you see it go 10 extra minutes, that's usually because they called a vote at the same time as the Financial Services Committee meeting, and that committee meeting had to temporarily adjourn to get everybody to get out of that meeting and onto the floor to vote, and then go back to the meeting. The Committee for the Modernization of Congress is meant to work to prevent things like that from happening. So that work is meant to say, what can we do to make Congress not just more effective, but more efficient? Because we are now in a modern era, but we're still dealing with the same old problems. And we talk about not just scheduling, but we talk about what does it mean we talk about bipartisanship. How does that work? How can we actually have more conversations to make bipartisanship have the great comeback that it needs. Those are the conversations that happen in that committee.
Okay, is it expected to put out a report or what?
Yes, so
Okay.
there are not, you won't see a memo after every meeting, but there will be an interview report.
Ultimately, be a report, okay. Is this something that can be implemented by the leadership or require a vote, or what do you think in terms of achieving, wherever they come up and say, here's what we need to do to improve, make Congress more efficient?
So this is our first time on the committee.
Okay.
I can't say what will happen with this particular
Right.
report. I know that it is something that will be shared and that the work will be done to implement what's in the report, but the how is new to us.
Okay, well, this is the first committee. Makes me kind of wonder, gee, is this a committee that's always there and maybe doesn't get a whole lot done? I don't know, just to be a cynic, but.
It's our first time on the
Right,
committee.
right, yeah.
As a freshman, I can't speak
That's
to
right,
the
right.
history of the outcomes, but I know what we are working toward as members of the committee now.
Okay, all right. Maybe the Congresswoman has only been there 18 months. What would she say has been the most significant thing she's done, or what she's proudest of in her time in Congress?
Oh, goodness. This is a lot to be proud of.
Okay.
So we worked to pass with Representative Don Young, actually, who sadly
right.
recently
Yeah,
passed,
yeah,
actually.
yeah. Okay.
Child Care is an Economic Development Strategy Act. So we call it the SEDS Act, so you have to excuse me for trying to visualize the letters. But we talk a lot about what it takes to have a stable household. And one of the things that we were able to agree on, again, that's centering people and the most marginalized, is people really want to go to work so that they can take care of their families. Not everyone, people want to take on the responsibility for caring for their families. So we worked with him to move the SEDS Act forward so that child care could be prioritized so that people could get back to work. We saw with the pandemic that two family working households became one because there was no child care resource. And then as people got back to work, the number of opportunities for child care had dwindled to nearly naught. So making sure that child care is a staple in our economic development strategy across the country was something that we were able to do, and something that she is proud of, but as an office, we're really proud of. And so we're not just talking about infrastructure money for bridges, but with the infrastructure for a family to have what it needs to take care of themselves.
Especially you mentioned Don Young, who was the dean of the House, a Republican, geographically from Alaska. So how does he and Nikema Williams get together when they seem to be at opposite extremes, geographically, seniority-wise, whatever else? How does it happen that they work together on this piece of legislation?
Some of the best conversations happen on the floor, which unfortunately
I
can't be on.
Right, all right, okay. So she just comes back to the office and says, just had this great conversation with Don
That
Young.
happens a lot. You'd be
Okay,
surprised.
all
So
right.
I make the joke with the Congresswoman so when I was an intern on the Hill a long time ago, I was a part of the last class where interns could be on the House floor. And then unfortunately, right after that 9/11 happened, so a lot of changes have occurred. So we are not as privy to the conversations that happen there, but that really is the place for members of Congress to socialize. I want you to also remember, when we came into Congress, we were in year 2 of the pandemic. So most of the opportunities that people had to socialize outside of the office did not exist. So leaning into making sure you introduce yourself and get to know as many people on the floor as possible was not just what she needed to do, it was the responsible thing to do, because that's where those relationships will come from. And so she did a lot of that work, making sure that she met people both sides of the aisle, who are willing to do the work for the people. And so, yeah, a lot of those conversations do happen on the floor.
Okay. If I was trying to figure who she would work with, that would not be the person who would come immediately to mind.
Another opportunity, though, is the Committee on the Modernization of Congress. So that is a committee that's represented by Democrats and Republicans who are looking to do the work to make Congress better.
Okay.
And so some of those other conversations and the opportunities to work together come from being on that committee.
And I would think that'd be a committee too, where partisanship would not be that significant. Okay, thank you. All right.
But you did ask about things that we're proud of. So we talked about the SEDS Act.
Okay.
Pushing the Abolition Amendment is something that we're really big on and very proud of. And again, working to make sure that everybody knows this is us working with everyone to correct a problem that shouldn't exist. There should not be an exception to slavery that still exists. And if we can work together to correct the language, then we will. And so an easy way to have that conversation about how that works was just looking for states who've already done this work. And in the state of Utah, the state amended their state constitution to make sure that that correction was made and that there was no loophole that would allow for slavery in any way, shape, or form. And so that is another way we look for people already doing the work, regardless of their party ID, and then reach out and make those connections.
Okay, good, good. We're supposed to have some questions from the audience now, right? Yes? Okay.
And I'll pass the mic around so that our virtual audience can hear you.
All right. Got some up here, right.
Hi, thank you again so much for joining us. I was curious, how does the Congresswoman, tackle having these two hugely important jobs as obviously Congresswoman for the 5th District and, being over the Georgia Democratic Party, like when, maybe other states that might be two different roles. It's not very often you see somebody heading up a state party who's also in such high elected office. How is she able to, tackle both of these jobs at the same time?
So it's not as foreign of a thing as you might realize. Although she is the state party chair, there are other members of Congress who are heads of either their state party or local parties. You'll see Robin Kelly is head of the party in Illinois. Congressman Meeks is head of a county party in New York. Speaker Pelosi used to be head of her party. So it is not as, one, she doesn't sleep. That's something that, as a chief of staff, just drives me nuts. Like, I need you to rest. But she is really passionate about making sure that Georgia has the most opportunity to be as engaged and to move itself forward as it can. And so for her, walking away from being party chair while all of these great things were happening and they were getting the work done just didn't make sense. And I stick by the fact that I think she made the best decision to make sure that she finished and honored that commitment to carry the state party to where it is now. She also has separate staff. So it is not impossible, but she has always looked for and identified really smart people who want to lean in and do the work. And so it has been nice for me to see that we have this load here, and then the DPG team is awesome, and they lean in to make sure that they're picking up the load and doing the work, and that communication happens where it needs to.
Right here, question right here.
Hey there, thanks again for stopping by. I just heard this could be completely wrong. I believe Amtrak is opening a huge hub in Atlanta, and I wanted to know if Congresswoman Williams had played a major part in that and how she spearheaded that project.
So they are looking to expand and create new hubs, and Atlanta is one of their proposed locations. Right now, Amtrak has a stop on Peachtree Street and, I knew the intersection, but I know where their stop is. And right now, the way that area is set up, there is an opportunity, but there's a lot more work and conversation to be done. There had already been conversations with Norfolk Southern, CSX, and a lot of our other railroad partners to talk about what the opportunity would look like to increase and improve rail through our corridor. Those conversations continue to happen. She continues to be actively involved. And as the transportation nerd in the office, I'm like, yes, I'm so all for it. But there are some barriers to access that we have to talk about that don't readily allow for that thing to happen tomorrow. We are a very car-heavy state. And you want to make sure that when people are accessing something that you consider a hub, that there's room for safe pedestrian traffic. Would we love for that to come to fruition and to the fore? Yes, and we will continue to be involved in the conversations to make that happen. But I will say that what we're reading about right now is not yet set in stone, but we will be excited as an office to be able to tout that from the rooftops once it is.
Question right there in the front.
Thank you guys so much for this conversation. So, you all talked about earlier how, she's filling these big shoes of Congressman John Lewis and, her coming into this kind of a legacy seat. It's a lot. And with Congressman Lewis and his work when he did with voting rights, his situation, how he was very instrumental with the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and all of just the work after that. I kind of just wanted to know how Congresswoman Williams is, continuing that legacy and also working in Georgia. We saw Senate Bill 202 and all these different legislation that's being passed to try to, whether on purpose or not, trying to, make it harder for individuals to be able to vote and have access to voting. So just trying to see how Congresswoman Williams is working with organizations in Georgia to make sure that everyone has the free and fair right to election coming into the next midterms and 2024 and, every election after that.
Okay, I want to make sure I got all those questions.
Yes.
So we talked about working to fulfill the legacy of Congressman Lewis. We talked about voting rights, and then you talked about Congress.
Congresswoman Williams and how she's working with organizations like grassroots in Georgia to make sure that election language is being known to people who are constituents and even those just regular Georgians as well. And then how they're able to make sure that right is still secure and is still properly available as we go into more future elections.
Awesome. So what I will say is the Congresswoman, and she reminds us of this, we are here to honor Congressman Lewis and to know that we can't fill his shoes, but we can work to continue to fulfill and further his legacy and carry the mantle forward further and farther as he would have wanted her to. Giants like that, it is nearly an exercise in futility to try and fill their shoes. He has left a mark on us, on the 5th District and on this country that we will continue to honor. And in doing that work, she has been an outspoken champion for voting rights and voter protection. So glad you brought that up, and actually glad you asked that question about her remaining chair of the Democratic Party of Georgia. Democratic Party of Georgia, as chairwoman, she has made sure that they have done the work to preserve and to protect the rights of voters. And they have a 24-hour hotline that you can't look to every state and say that you have the opportunity to say, I'm not clear if my vote was being suppressed or if I just didn't fill out the right thing. And you can call any hour of the day and pick up, you can call any hour of the day and reach out to the voter protection hotline to make sure that you are not just being protected, but you're being put in the right direction for the assistance that you need so that you can vote. So that is something that she has done as chair. But being a member of Congress, making sure that we are pushing for H.R. 1 and H.R. 4 is not just the work of every day. It's not just something she did when they came to the floor, but it is making sure that people know and still have continued hope for what we can do to protect voting rights in this country. Reminding everybody that the civil rights movement was a movement and not a moment. So we may not have been successful in this initial instance, but it's something that's evergreen and will continue to push until we are able to secure voting rights for everybody and to protect the rights of everybody. I will say it's also a benefit to her, having worked in the state legislature, to know what's happening with SB 202 and to be able to converse with other members of Congress so that they can be proactive in their own states about what could possibly come to fore in their districts. And yes, in terms of relationships with activist groups and advocate groups, that is a staple of who we are as an office. So we work as a staff to make sure that we are not just listening to the lobbyist or the other member of Congress, but we're listening to the constituents and the advocacy groups who have been doing the work to protect voting rights for a long period of time so that we are all working in concert to make this thing happen. So New Georgia Project, Fair Fight, those are partners. They're not just entities doing the same work. Those are organizations that we work in partnership with to make sure that we're doing the right thing to protect voting rights.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, as
someone who's very obviously knowledgeable about the inner workings of Congress, given the recent failure of the climate change and tax legislation that failed in the Senate that got passed out of the House, what do you see as any way forward on a sort of climate change resolution legislation to address climate change, whether in Congress or any actions that could possibly take place out of Congress? Just like, what do you think it would take for the nation to finally like really do something?
What I have learned from working in Congress is that a large bill, so let's address the elephant in the room, like Build Back Better, not moving forward the way we would have wanted to, is not the end of the world, right? You are talking about major pieces of legislation, whether it be having to do with climate change or infrastructure, et cetera. These are things that have a lot in them that we want to do the major and the most good. So we're always looking for maximum good. But when the maximum good is not able to happen, so for example with climate change, that doesn't mean we're not going to continue to do smaller things with smaller individual bills to try to get to that marker. So making sure that we've done the funding for EVs, which are electronic vehicles, so that in your state, if that is something that your state is going to use toward the goal of reducing our climate impact, then that's something that's been funded already. And we've found other avenues to make sure that we're trying to attack the problem through, if not necessarily through that direct climate change bill, then we did something here in infrastructure that we can say helped with climate change. And then what are we doing down the line in this committee that we can also to have a value add to help? One major thing not working is not going to stop us from trying to find other little things to, other things that can move the marker. So we're either going to get there quickly or we're going to get there slowly, but we're going to work to make sure we get there.
We mentioned EVs, and Georgia boasts having attracted Rivian and now Hyundai. And yeah, those are things I guess the state has primarily done, but the Congresswoman being on the Transportation Committee, is there a role for the federal level to get involved with those kinds of efforts?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the funding for EV stations, a lot of that most recent funding will come federally.
Okay.
And because of the bipartisan infrastructure law.
All right. So it goes back to that then.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right. Yeah. Trying to guess, when are we likely to see that? I mean, you see more and more EVs every day. But my guess is it's still probably large parts of Georgia and the rest of the country. It'd be hard to go find a place to plug in.
Not necessarily. So the smart thing. So a few things. So we also look for smart solutions that can happen readily. So we just got bipartisan infrastructure funding last year, and we're seeing an announcement at the airport about 6 months later. That's pretty fast for Congress. Yeah. So what we look for, so there's also funding that's gone to MARTA for fast track buses, and that's something that you're going to see sooner rather than later. Okay. Same thing, looking for universities and schools that are willing to host EV stations. Those are the things that are going to get funded first, so that we can quickly point to, not only did we bring you this money, but let's show you how we got to work quickly so that we can replicate and implement in other locations. So I actually wouldn't say we will be waiting a long time to see that come to fruition. I would say keep your eyes open for the next announcement.
Okay. All right. Good. Yeah.
Well, Ms. Farah, okay, good. So, a great understudy brings real value add. And I have to say, as Chief of Staff, I always know Chief of Staff knows everything. You are all over it. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Wonderful. And Dr. Bullock, as always, thank you for your thoughtful questions, and to our audience and folks who joined us online. Special thanks again to our alumni board and to McGuire Woods. Please be on the lookout for other events here back in Athens. Again, we'll be back in DC in October, and we look forward to that. Thanks again.